the thing about the archetypes is, if deeply within you, you have an archetype that is a great part of who you are, then your great joy is in fulfilling that archetype. So you might belong to a family who pulls on your capacity to go to school and do well, and you can do it with your ego. But the depths of you is not in it. The depths of you might be in working with your hands. And if you could find a way to use that skill that comes naturally, you could find great joy in fulfilling who you are.
Keep watching to learn more.
You can now download all 9 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we are going to explore archetypal psychology. This is part 2 in a 3-part series. With me is Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolen, a clinical professor of psychiatry at the University of California Medical Center in San Francisco. Dr. Bolen is the author of several books, including The Tao of Psychology, The Ring of Power, Goddesses in Every Woman, and Gods in Every Man. Welcome, Jean.
Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to be with you again, and today we'll be exploring the issue of the archetypes, and in particular, the archetypes of the deities, and the way in which they interact with human beings. I guess it would be fair to say that the deities of ancient cultures are among the most powerful of archetypes.
They certainly are in our education, Western civilization. I use the Greek gods and goddesses, which really are the same as the Roman ones. And they have been active in our imaginations for 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. So we really do relate to these stories because at some level we know that they aren't about ancient gods, but about aspects of people that we know. They're really about us.
Mm-hmm. Well, lots of contemporary rational thinkers are fond of making statements like the gods are projections of our psyches, but I think when we speak of them as archetypes, we mean something a little different.
Well, it's the same. Mm-hmm. If whether we project them from inside outside or whether we experience them inside, they're the patterns that we relate to, experience, are affected by, and it doesn't matter where we experience them, inside, outside, the fact that we have such a sense of what their personalities and attributes are. And it's cross-culture. I happen to be writing about the Greek ones because those are the ones that I know best. Mm-hmm. But I know enough about other cultures to know that Zeus, the major god for us in Greek mythology, or Jupiter, as he's called in Roman mythology, is Wotan in German mythology, and so on.
Or Indra in the Hindu mythology. And yet I can't help but think that there's something different about, say, the archetypes of the gods as opposed to the archetypes of the heroes or about other characters and other other dramas. There's the divine quality about them that gives them somehow more numinosity, might be the word.
Well, numinosity meaning a sense of awe. Actually, the Greek myths are about divinities that are quite human. Mm-hmm. And most of them don't carry that numinosity that we feel towards having a, say, transcendent, here and now spiritual experience. Mm. So that I write about them as archetypal figures in our psyche. Mm-hmm. And have noted how our particular culture favors some and punishes or rejects or puts, especially men who have archetypes in them that are not favored, at a disadvantage. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the ways of looking at the archetypes in men, or the male archetypes that are present in both men and women.
I suppose one of the fundamental things that we can say about these various pantheons, whether it's the Hindu, the Greek or Roman or the Norse, is that they are all expressive of a patriarchal culture.
Well, whenever there is a system in which there's a sky god, that is a god who rules from a mountaintop, which is about really all of our religions seem to have that quality, there's authority, and there is the capacity to punish, so that when we go against authority, to this day we wait for lightning to strike, which was Zeus's attribute. If he were unhappy with a mortal or a divinity, mm-hmm. his major weapon was a thunderbolt, and lightning did strike you. And so, in even ways like waiting for lightning to strike, the Greek mythology is very alive in our psyches.
Mm-hmm. It's not so different, I suppose, from the legends of Yahweh in the Old Testament.
Yahweh, Wotan, Zeus, Jupiter, they're all quite similar. They're very much power-oriented divinities who have definite laws and authority. And if you do what they approve of, you're fine. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, you're in trouble. Mm-hmm. So that in Greek mythology, if you were a god or goddess for whom the sky realm, which is a metaphor for the mind, if you are at home in the sky, then you're favored. So that Apollo, the god of the sun, who was Zeus's favored son, is a mental god. Mm-hmm. And the mental realm is really very much honored, rewarded. If you think abstractly and are a banker, you do a lot better than if you work with your hands and as a carpenter in this culture. And all the archetypes are present in all of us. They're all, what they are human patterns, much as we have an ability, all of us, to be musical or to be artistic. Certain of us, or sports or coordination, these are intellectual. Mm-hmm. These are human capacities, but different people are just better at certain ones because mm-hmm. they're inherently able to do certain things. Mm-hmm. The archetypes are the same way. All of them are potentially present in us all. But some archetype often is the archetype that you are most likely to be connected with. Yeah. And if it's one that is favored in your family and in the culture, success is yours. And if there are, well, within reason, I mean, success, you have a successful archetype. And one of the things that I was trying to describe in much of my writing is what happens in you because of your archetypes when it interacts with the culture of the family or culture of society. Mm-hmm.
So when you say your archetypes, I guess you're referring to some very deep dynamic within each of us.
Well, like when you see children of 2 and 3 and 4, their personality patterns, whether they're outgoing, aggressive, assertive, or introverted, retiring, whether they're interested in people or whether they're interested in things, whether they're verbal or not, those are inherent personality patterns. Well, they also happen to be very similar to patterns that can be called archetypes. And then if you want to name an archetype, you can name it for its qualities. And the Greek divinities fit these very well.
They're like roadmaps.
Yes, like roadmaps.
So I might be, I think I am perhaps to some degree, the embodiment of the Hermes archetype.
The Hermes was the messenger god, also known as Mercury. And he was able to bring ideas from Zeus or messages from Zeus anywhere. And anyone who's a communicator has Hermes. I do too, because I like words. I like to explain things. And when you get into the area of wanting to communicate ideas that have to do with meaning, then it corresponds to Hermes as guide of the soul, which was one of his attributes. One of the things that I saw as a major point for us to appreciate archetypes is one is to know ourselves better. But the other is to realize that because certain ones are favored and certain other ones are not, what happens to us as we grow up. And I was drawn to the myth of Procrustes in his bed. Very short myth, but it was basically if you were a man who would go to Athens, you had to pass Procrustes in his bed. And Athens is a metaphor for the center of activity, for the top of the ladder if you're successful. I mean, Athens, after all, was the center of art and political power and athletics. It was everything.
Mainstream culture.
It's the Big Apple.
Yeah.
So if you are on a track, if you are a man or a woman who's on the road to Athens, metaphorically, you pass Procrustes in his bed. And Procrustes would take you, and if any part of you didn't fit on the bed, it was just cut off. And if you were too short for the bed, you were stretched as if on a rack until you fit it. And that's what happened to you on the way to Athens. Well, it relates to what happens to us, that if any part of us is not welcomed into the world, then what happens is that we're made to feel ashamed of it. And so we cooperate as well as find that the school doesn't like it, the family doesn't like it, and we cut ourselves off from it. So we are processed also by Procrustes in his bed. And if you have an archetype like Zeus or Apollo or Hermes, who are the mental gods, who work with power and ideas well, then that natural ability is stretched so that perhaps you become a very one-sided human being as a result. And those archetypes that have to do, for example, with an obscure god named Hephaestus, who was one of the 12 Olympians, but we don't hear very much about him. And he wasn't very successful on Olympus either. That is, he was the god who worked by making things with his hands. He was a god of the forge. He was a god who was rejected by his mother for being imperfect, and rejected by his father, apparently because he intervened when there was a family argument, and he was thrown off of Olympus.
He was the crippled god.
He was crippled.
Yes.
And what he did was make things at his forge underground. Now,
Suits of armor,
all kinds of things, including beautiful things. Well, in our particular culture, the craftsman who goes into his workshop and just makes things with his hands is not honored in terms of success in the world, like the messenger god or the Apollo thinking gods or archetypes, who can do well in school, who can go up the corporate ladder, who can use words and use power very well. And that's one of the, and yet the thing about the archetypes is, if deeply within you have an archetype that is a great part of who you are, then your great joy is in fulfilling that archetype. So you might belong to a family who pulls on your capacity to go to school and do well, and you can do it with your ego. But the depths of you is not in it. The depths of you might be in working with your hands. And if you could find a way to use that skill that comes naturally, you could find great joy in fulfilling who you are archetypally. And that's one of the experiences people have about who you are depends on what the archetypes are that are strong in you. And when you fulfill them, when you it's sort of like having a gift that you do well. Partially there's a problem if you can become one-sided if that's all you do. But the other really positive experience is that you can find great depth and meaning in living from that archetype.
I suppose by studying the myths of the gods, and if one has identified one's active archetype, then there's also the opportunity to be able to anticipate some of the difficulties that one may have.
Yes, for example, the god Poseidon, who was the god of the sea, and who in mythology was the god who would enter contests and not think the situation through. So he, for example, had a contest with Athena, mythologically, over who would become the divinity who would rule over the people. And the contest was that whichever divinity gave them the best gift would win. And Athena gave them the olive tree, and Poseidon, with his great trident, struck it into the ground, and up came a big spring, but it was salt water. And the people chose the gift from Athena and became the city of Athens. And his immediate reaction to that mythologically was he was so angry that he flooded the plain. Now, this is just a story, except if you have a Poseidon father, for example, and you read about Poseidon mythologically, you recognize how that great watery image of affect or feeling often just comes up from the depths, and suddenly you feel like you've been flooded by his emotions. And especially if he is, like Poseidon, not successful in the world, that somehow he gets out-strategized because he doesn't think along strategy lines. And then, frustrated, he gets enraged, and his reaction is to just flood the situation with feeling. Well, many people recognize either themselves or someone very significant in their lives as having this quality. And it would be very helpful to understand that that is a part of a person, a feeling part of the person, but there is a necessity to develop other aspects to balance it.
And it's certainly true, I understand, that many of the different deity archetypes can be operating within us at different times, or even at one time. If
you think about all of them as being mainly the names of human patterns that we all have, and that many of them do operate, and operate at cross purposes, one of the notions that I think is very useful is to think of ourselves as a committee. And having all the many aspects of ourselves as committee members or members of the circle. And if ego is the equivalent of chair of the board or the chairman, then you have a well-functioning psyche in which the appropriate part of you takes over at appropriate times, because the ego can recognize what part of us needs to be operating in this situation, or can observe when something is taking us over, which an archetype can do. It can have an emotional, affectual power that just for a time takes you over, but the observing ego can note that. And it's a way of working with people that is can say, this is what happens under certain circumstances, but it's not all of who you are. So as a clinical way of looking at people, it's very useful because the archetypes all have negative or shadow sides, and they have positive strengths. And you can understand what your problems are often as an archetypal problem, and be open to accepting it easier, because it's not like getting a whole just a psychological, negative, pathological label. One of the interesting stories along those lines that you wrote about that impressed me was with reference to the temples at Delphi in Greece, which were
the home of the god Apollo. However, for 3 months of the year, they were turned over to Dionysius, as if to suggest that Apollo himself recognized his own limitations.
Or that was just how it was. That though in a man who has an Apollo rational capacity, may also recognize that somewhere, not so much as a predominant part of him, but as a definite aspect of himself, there is the ecstatic side, the side that loves sensory experience. That could be the kind of lover that has a merger experience. That is a part of him too, and that the world may only see the Apollo in the suit who rises up the corporate ladder and is really able to behave like a favored son, works well with authority. Apollo at Delphi, and in the Homeric hymn to Apollo, his major attribute at times was to do his father's will. Consequently, men who are like Apollo are team players. They do very well as kind of the oldest son of a powerful father. And yet, somewhere in him, there might be a Dionysian side. And then, in his psyche, as you point out, as in Delphi, for 3/4 of the time, Apollo rules. But 1/4 of the time, a Dionysian element will come, and for a while, be the dominant part of him.
And
that's appropriate.
These are two very different archetypal patterns, aren't they?
And as different as they are, they offer the possibility of holding opposites within ourselves and having some balance within ourselves, which is one of the major notions of individuation or development is first to develop who it is that you most authentically are. But the other is to develop other aspects of yourself that are not the dominant ones, so that you have a whole personality. And whether you say that wholeness comes from developing archetypes that are less developed as well as your dominant one, or whether it is that you develop a more feminine aspect to yourself if you're a masculine energy person, all of it has to do with appreciating diversity within ourselves and developing it, which is one of Jung's major contributions to psychology, is this notion of development in the second half of life.
Can we talk for a moment about the issue of goddesses operating within men, or god archetypes within women?
Well, all the archetypes are present in us all, and we can live them out, or we can have a picture of them in us of what they are, so that an Aphrodite woman, for example, or a woman who can for part of her life be very much in her business suit and being Athena with her mind, may have a very strong Aphrodite as well. And when she makes the shift, she feels it. It's like she's now not in her mind, but in her body. And there's a whole sensuality and a capacity to be in the present. Aphrodite is very much in the present. Athena, the mental, logical one, can strategize years ahead with a business plan or something. But when she's Aphrodite, she's in her body, she feels sensual, and she is totally focused on the beauty of the person or the attraction of the person who's in front of her. And so at that point, she is really being Aphrodite. Now, a man, and often a very successful politician, has that same ability that when you're with him, he can hang on your words and you can feel like he thinks you are the most important person in the world for 2 minutes. And he goes on. And I remember that this is one of the attributes that the early mayor of San Francisco, Moscone, was described as having, that he could really make you feel that way. And so at that point, there was an Aphrodite quality in him. Now, he also might have an image of Aphrodite in him, so that when a woman comes along who captures some of that sense, like Marilyn Monroe did, as an archetypal figure, then she's not just seen as an attractive woman, but projected on her is the Aphrodite carried by individual men, who then are drawn to the goddess that they are attracted to. In fact, when Aphrodite is present between people, there is a different quality of consciousness. That is, both feel as if they are god and goddess.
Now, you talked a moment ago about Jung. The goal of Jungian archetypal psychology is development, and I think Jung used the term individuation. And my sense is that this involves a kind of integration or wholeness of the different archetypal patterns within us coming together in sort of a unified way, so that the gods aren't quarreling or squabbling with each other, but somehow functioning as a whole.
Well, Jung has more than one use of the word individuation. And certainly one is, as you describe, which is a harmonious development of the different aspects of yourself and an integration, basically, of less conscious parts of yourself into you being a more conscious person. And it might be integration of your contrasexual side, it might be integration of your shadow, it might be integration of that which you just are not terrific at. If you're extroverted, the whole introverted side, it doesn't come easily. And in the second half of life, we are attracted to develop that which we are undeveloped in. It's like if we do our life well, we often are rewarded in the first half of life because who we are and what the world expected worked out pretty decently. That's why it does make a difference whether your archetypes are those that work for you in the first half of life. Those people that, by the way, who are out of step in the first half of life often do have a more difficult first half of life course, but they are very often ahead of the person in the second half of life for whom it came so easily. Because they have individuated, that is, that they have developed along the lines that they genuinely are. Yes. They didn't just adapt their persona to what was expected.
They really are themselves. And
much more so.
Maybe been highlighted by their conflict with the culture at large.
True.
And that serves them well in the second half of life.
Yes, it does. Where the point is to develop individually instead of fulfilling the collective expectations. Now, Jung also felt that part of individuation was developing your connection with the archetype of the self, or the archetype of meaning, and have a sense of that spiritual dimension. So that's part of the potential meaning of individuation as well. But Jung emphasized healthy development, and said that he was able to do that because Freud had done the work on so much of the pathology of development. And so he could then focus on individuation, where, for example, in his notion of analyst and analyst, at that point he notes that who the analyst is has a great deal to do with how the individuation process and analysis goes.
Jean Shinoda Bolen, we're out of time. I know we could talk for a great deal longer about this, and particularly about the relationships in analysis. And we'll continue our discussion in part 3 of this series, of which we have just completed part 2. Thanks so much for being with me.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you for being with us, and please tune in again for part 3 of this 3-part series on archetypal psychology.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. the topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 9 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
For early access to our videos and live stream events, sign up for our free weekly newsletter at newthinkingaloud.org.